Welcome to SpanReads, not your typical rereads podcast, a 17th shard series where we reread the Cosmere and are giant nerds about it. Unlike the traditional reread style, we won't be going through each book chapter by chapter, but instead looking at different themes and the placement of the books within the wider Cosmere. Each SpanReads series will bring you 4 episodes, the first 3, reactions and retrospectives, character relationships, and magic system use in the story will be spoilers for that book and prior books in the series. Then we'll cap things off with a full spoiler Cosmere episode. Today, we're talking about Warbreaker. I'm Ian, and joining me is Mish.
Hi, firstRainbowRose.
Jessie.
Hello, I'm Lady Lameness.
And Katie.
Hello, I'm AonEne.
And I'm Weiry. To reiterate, this episode will have spoilers for this book only, because it's a standalone.
For now. Who knows? Maybe in 5 years we'll finally get the sequel.
I want it so badly.
We'll just look into the future to talk about that one too. It's fine.
Yeah. So what did people think rereading Warbreaker?
I had so many thoughts.
Light song.
I love this book so much. There wasn't a lot that I had forgotten about because it's one of my favorites, so I've read it more than most of them. But it's so... I forget how good it is, even though it's one of my favorites.
Definitely one of the ones I've read the least.
Yes.
And so I do kind of forget how good it actually is a lot of the time. Because with Mistborn and Stormlight, we get a lot of books in that world. It really cements in your head, but you just get one book.
I think also with Warbreaker, with it being a single book, it's very interesting the way Brandon has set it up character-wise, right? Because you've got like the 2 sisters. One of them is pretty dislikable at the beginning. The other one is quite likable. But then like you put Vivenna with this group of people that are like super great and you really like them. And then they're the bad guys. And the person who's been the scruffy ruffian, like, what's his deal? What's he up to? Is the good guy. But you don't learn that until so late in the book. So it's just kind of hard to attach to characters, I think, in the same way you can to the crew in Mistborn or like the big 3 in Stormlight, where you can attach to them at the beginning because you kind of know their character and that doesn't change in a big way, like halfway through the book with Denth and that, because I forgot quite how charismatic they were and just how blatant they were as well. Like they go up to Vivenna and they're like, so wouldn't it be funny if we were like here to kidnap you and like kill the person you're coming to find? Like, wouldn't that be so funny just to like disarm her and make her think that that's not what was going to happen? And they're just so charismatic. So I think Warbreaker kind of has, that's not a problem, but it's a difference. That is a big difference that jumps out to me. Yeah.
And like it just goes to show Denth's character. Because Tong Fa, not subtle.
No.
Like, I think a lot of the jokes are Denth covering for Tong Fa just saying things that like, oh, haha, like, yeah, that's a joke.
I mean,
but totally serious on Tong Fa's part.
Denth does make a lot of things like, mercenary humor things that are...
He does. He does.
Tong Fa doesn't. Oh, yeah, no, Tong Fa... Can I stab him? No. Yeah. But I don't get to be the bad guy. I'll let you be the bad guy next time. You promise? Yes, I promise.
Yeah, but definitely with what Brandon was trying to do with having a crew like with Mistborn, except what if the crew was not good and not the protagonists? Like it definitely came through very well. I was surprised how long that went on for. For some reason, I thought the reveal that they were bad guys and Vash was the good guy was like the first third of the book, and it's like the last quarter of the book.
Yeah, no, which it's interesting how much you come to love Vasher because you get like 3 viewpoints from him before he kidnaps Vivenna, and then he's in the last like quarter of the book really, but you come to love him so much from the short period of time that you really see him.
Yeah, because he is that not particularly charismatic nerd that's bad with people.
Yeah.
Which describes a lot of people that like fantasy books. One thing that did catch me by surprise in this book, in this reread, was how much I latched on to Denth as a character. Because, Denth's a fun character. I've always liked Denth. He's charismatic, he's fun, he's evil. But to date the recording of this episode terribly and show you how far in advance we do this, Obi-Wan Kenobi is currently airing. So I'm very much in a Star Wars headspace right now. And Anakin Skywalker is one of my favorite characters. And I'm just like, oh, Denth is basically Anakin Skywalker to me. Because he was a good person who did some bad things, and he's a very bad person now. The inherent self-loathing involved with that is just beautiful to me. I'm like, yes, give me more. So I'm so sad Denth dies in this book because I want more Denth. I want Denth's backstory. Give me Warbreaker Secret History. That's just the 5 scholars doing stuff. Please, Brandon.
Right? No, I love the whole 5 scholars thing in general. Just the fact that you never get much more than just these little tidbits, and I'm hoping that that's something that will come up more in Nightblood. Is a bit more of Vasher's backstory and a bit more of the 5 scholars and stuff. But you really do. He sprinkles in there just enough interesting things that you feel like you know the 5 scholars without actually knowing them.
I think I could have done with maybe a teensy bit more, either about the 5 scholars or about the many wars, because every time I read this book, I get confused about what was happening and how things came together. And I get that Brandon's not trying to fully answer that by the end, but this is probably the first time since whenever I started reading this book that I've actually been able to piece enough of it together to be like, okay, I think I could walk away from this book not just feeling confused. So I think for me, I could have done with a little bit more just so things were a bit more cohesive with the backstory.
Yeah, it's the downside of a standalone. You don't have as much page time to dig into that stuff.
Yeah. Well, a standalone that is intended to have a sequel, and I'm confident that a lot more of that will probably come out in the sequel, because
true.
From what I gathered, the sequel is going to focus a little bit more on Vasher and Vivenna and taking on Aristil?
Yestiel. Aristil is Claude.
Yeah, whichever the one is still alive.
One thing that I forgot about this book is that even when you're rereading it, some parts really come across as still being tense and still being interesting in that way. For example, when Vivenna's on her way back to the safe house, after being kidnapped by Vasher, it's a very safe house, guys. After being kidnapped by Vasher for that first time, on her way back, it feels tense, especially knowing that what she's going to get back to and the horrific scene that it is. But even before that, it's very much like she just got out of a horrific situation. She's injured, she's got some of her breath out, and she's just kind of taking it with her. And she's jumping at shadows, and it's tense, it's worrying. And then you get back and it just kind of all compounds as the reveal that these people aren't safe happens. And Parlin, rest in peace, Parlin.
Poor Parlin.
He's gone. And then also, even at the very first scene of the book, where Vasher's be careful, friend, that sword can be dangerous, when he's in prison and he's talking to the guards. That feels tense to me. All those scenes where you don't really know what Nightblood's deal is, and it's just mysteriously taking people out. That's good writing. That's it builds something in you.
Yeah, that's one thing I I definitely noticed in this book is the foreshadowing is done very well.
Mm-hmm.
With Nightblood, with the pawn call switcheroo, because it's mentioned all along. It's like, the pawn call worship something else. But they are constantly dismissed, which is exactly what they want people to. They want people to dismiss them. They want to be ignored so that they can kind of get out from underneath Hallandren domination, I guess. Oppression. Yeah.
It's interesting because their ultimate goal is to not have to be the ignored people anymore, but to get to their end goal. They are utilizing the fact that people do treat them this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But also with the Nanrova's daughter arc, because Vasher meets with him very early and he's on the side of anti-war. And then we do get the scene of them attacking the carriage, and Vivenna is we stole the coins, and then she goes, and then it's later on it's mentioned Nanrova has switched sides and nobody really knows why. It's Lightsong assumes Blushweaver did it, but Blushweaver was also surprised. So it's that little but it's not dwelt on. So it's that's weird, and then you dismiss it and move on until more of the pieces come together. It's oh, yeah, because Vivenna does explicitly say it's Nanrova's carriage.
Even though these storylines are separated to some degree, they are all interwoven, and it really shows how much of an impact an action in one part of the story can affect another part of the story.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to talk to somebody who's reading Warbreaker for the first time more recently, because it's been so long. I don't remember how the reveal of the 5 scholars being who they are in modern day Nalthis actually goes over. Because there's a lot of Vasher just talks about things and doesn't really dwell on them. It's how do you know those things? You're talking about, oh yeah, Shashara it invented the command for the one breath lifeless. It's that was for the many war. How old are you?
Yeah. And it's so subtle that some of the things that he talks about, but you catch when you're rereading, you're okay, yep, nope, it's all there. But when you're reading it the first time, you're just what are you going on about?
Yeah. So right. Yeah. It's now it's oh, this is so obvious. How does that actually play out for a new reader?
Because it definitely can. And I think this is how I read it the first time. I can't quite remember. But you just kind of assume that Vasher knows that because it's history or something, because he knows the city better than other people. He seems to have been there for quite a while. So it's just oh, he just knows the history or something. And then I was less likely to jump to the conclusion of you are 500 years old and were there personally, and that's why you know all of this.
Can I say that I love the beauty of the different religions? Brandon does such a great job at making the two religions just so unique, but yet you can see how they might come from the shared history that they have, and the two kingdoms, and Vivenna. And I'll gush about this a little bit more in the character episode, but I love Vivenna's pride and the fact that when she recognizes the pride, but just the entire arc of the two sisters of, the fall of pride and the gaining of pride. And
yeah, structurally, there's just a lot of fascinating things in this book, because there are so many reversals throughout the entire book. There's the initial reversal of the wrong princess being sent and the wrong princess staying behind, because it starts with Ciri, oh, I'm useless, and then she gets sent off, and Vivenna has a scene where she's oh, now I'm useless. And it's But that does perpetually happen to the book.
There's a great line from Ciri at some point where she's been with the God King for a while and just has this sort of, well, maybe I'm not the best for this, but I actually don't think Vivenna would have been either. And like I think that's the first time she fully acknowledges that maybe she is actually the better person to be there than Vivenna at that point.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is like, if the two sisters hadn't been swapped, neither one of them would have succeeded in the other person's story.
Well, I mean, Ciri, it's kind of an interesting side thought of what would Ciri's life have been like if she hadn't been sent, because she would have stayed at home, probably gotten married at some point, and or, you know, really, she probably would have just died when they were attacked. And
yeah, it's probably the morbid way of looking at it, but yeah, I don't actually know if Vivenna would have achieved anything, and yeah, Ciri probably would have just died when it just was attacked.
Yeah. The other, like, I don't know if this is necessarily a recurring theme, but siblings play a significant role in this book, because it's the two sisters, the two brothers, Larmar and Lightsong, and then there's the brothers-in-law of Vasher and Denth.
And even going further, of Denth and Shashara being a brother and sister. And then Clud and the other one.
I don't think that Shashara, I think that it's actually Shashara loved Vasher, but Vasher didn't return the feelings. I don't think
they were, I'm pretty sure they were explicitly married.
I've never caught that. I always thought that it was a situation of they were really good friends. They worked well together. She loved him. I don't know if he ever returned her feelings one way or the other, but
no, I'm pretty sure they were married. To the cup of mind.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. They are explicitly married.
Is it word of Brandon or annotations? I'm just purely
I think might be annotations. Oh, and her return title was Glory Singer. I always forget that. That's such a good return name.
I love the return name. I love the drunken monkey theory. I always laugh at the drunken monkey theory.
I've always kind of subscribed to the drunken monkey theory. I don't think that there is actually very much to the names they are given.
I don't know. I mean, Warbreaker.
But what does it mean?
He broke the
wars. Could have been before the monkey. I don't know if I subscribe to the monkey theory, but devil's advocate.
I now want somebody I want there to be a world hopper from Hollindren who makes a reference to a drunken monkey in a different book. It will never happen because Lightsong is dead. He's the only one that really touted, I guess is the word I'm trying for, but like the drunken monkey theory. But I want somebody to be like, yeah, it's almost as bad as the drunken monkey.
We haven't spoken too much about Lightsong yet.
Yeah, I think we're trying to save. I think we're all trying to save it for the character episode because.
Yeah.
So something that I really like about Brandon's writing, and like even in other books like Mistborn or Stormlight, you kind of get this as well. But there's a lightness to his writing where like he will put in dark things, but he's not a grim dark author. He's not there to try and traumatize you with his writing. And particularly the start of the book, everything that Ciri goes through, I was reading it, and I think it's just because I had grimdark on my mind at the time. I was like, wow, a different writer could have really traumatized Ciri in a lot of these sections and like really traumatized the audience as well with like what Ciri has to go through. But instead, Brandon focuses on her embarrassment as a way of like, she's uncomfortable, but she's not experiencing things to such a degree that she could have when being effectively forcibly taken from her home to be given to a man to marry when she is like a young girl who was not planning to do this. And like, it's kind of the same with Vivenna. I think Brandon says in one of the annotations, like when Vivenna's on the streets, he could have gone darker with it, but he actively chose not to because he didn't need to. And it's just something I like about Brandon's writing. And I think for the book that he was trying to be like brighter in and more colorful in, he could have gone so dark with.
That's actually one thing that I was going to mention was with the torture of Parlin. You know that he was tortured, and but the worst thing that is said is something about his cheeks being slashed and her being able to see his mouth through the slashes. And that is the worst thing that is commented on. And it's like, he could have gone and different authors would have, they really dwelt on Parlin and what had been done to him and the horrors of what had happened. But instead, but at the same time, it isn't brushed over. When you see that scene, when you see Parlin, you're not like, oh, well, whatever, he was tortured. It's like, there's a gravitas to, oh no, he was tortured. But Brandon doesn't spell it out, and it still comes across.
I think probably how I would phrase this is that the horrors of the book aren't traumatizing, they're cathartic, and they mean things for the characters, but they don't actively harm the reader to read them.
Yeah, that's fair.
I was learning about the puppy war about at the time that I was starting this book, and I don't actually know if I want to read the puppy war anymore. I've learned enough about the book that I think I'm good. I think I'm fine skipping it.
Don't even know what this book is, but you're saying puppy war in regards to Grimdark, and I can probably never read it.
P-O-P-P-Y.
Oh, I thought you were saying...
I misheard it as puppy, too.
Puppy. And
I was like, oh, they're talking about that.
There's the classic, villain thing that of kicking the puppy. And I was like, wait, there's an entire book about kicking puppies? No, I'm okay.
Now I want somebody to write a grimdark puppy war where it's like actual puppies, like anthropomorphic puppies, just like fighting each other. Like the thing that it could be so fun, like, oh, like it's animals, like, and no, it's like it's total Game of Thrones.
Redwall, horrific.
Yeah.
That could be amazing.
I don't want to read it, but I think its sheer existence would be hilarious.
Here's a writing example for people to try for if they want, going out of the SpanReads about a completely different book.
But yeah, that's definitely something I appreciate about Brennan overall, is that Grimdark is just not my jam. Every once in a while, I'll read a Grimdark book, and it's like, I don't like what this says about humanity, but this is a well-written story. And Brennan, I don't even have to worry about that. It's just people are good, and that's what I want to believe.
Yeah.
Brandon has his style of writing, and like it works for him, and he very much sticks to that throughout the books. Like even in the ones with darker settings, they're still not in the depths of like depraved humanity. And like there's nothing wrong with those books. It's just something that I definitely noticed about Brandon's books, and something that I like about Brandon's books as well. It's like Grimdark isn't really for me, so it's nice to still be able to read other books that have like dark scenes, dark settings without it being like too much.
You said you had something else, Jess?
Yes, I do. We've talked a lot about the good things in this book. I have some complaints about this book.
Yeah.
One of them is something that only jumped out to me this time and just made me stop and question what the point of it was to begin with. There's the whole through line that Hallandren wants an Idrian princess because they have the royal locks, so they can introduce the royal locks back into the Hallandren line. The next God King is not Ciri's child, and Ciri would just go off and have her children and her family elsewhere, and that would not be the continued Hallandren line. So why did they make a treaty and wait 20 years of like hostile intentions? Was it just for posturing? Like, were they just trying to pretend that they had the line?
they want the royal blood. They don't want the royal locks because they actually specifically say that only those who could be the heir to the throne are going to have the royal locks.
But they're not getting the royal blood.
Yeah.
But
there's kind of two things going on, is that one, nobody would know because the fact that the God King is not always the son of the previous God King is super secret. So everybody would just assume, like, well, that's the mother. Like, yeah, we have the royal blood. Wouldn't necessarily have the royal locks that we know of. Don't know how that would interact with two monarchies. There's still a lot of that royal locks we don't know. But two is it is possible for Return to have children. They were hoping that she would get pregnant, and then the next God King actually would have royal blood. Well, it's just not a guarantee.
He wouldn't have the royal. Well, one interesting thing, being returned, would he have the royal locks just because he's raised his entire life thinking he should have the royal locks? But two, he wouldn't actually have the royal locks because Vivenna. Somebody says, "How do in the scene? One of the scenes where Dent is showing her off, the guy's like, "Okay, how'd you get somebody who has the royal locks?" And Vivenna's like, "No, only the direct descendants. As soon as somebody else takes the throne, as soon as my brother takes the throne, my children would not have the royal locks. It is only those who are in the direct line to the throne." So
that's the point I was trying to make, where it's like, we don't know how it would interact with two monarchies. Like,
that's interesting.
We just don't know, like, whether or not it would actually how that would apply.
That's fair.
I guess the thing is that they already have the next God King. That's why they want her to get pregnant so desperately. So it must just be a posturing thing of, like, people wouldn't know, so they would assume. And that just kind of breaks down a little bit of the logic for me. Like, it just makes it a shaky plot story structure.
Well, it's they have the next God King, assuming she doesn't get pregnant, in which case, like, that kid would be the next God King.
That is not how I read it. I read it as...
Because it's not explained in the text of the book very well.
Oh, I thought it was quite explicit.
The priests are lying. The priests are lying. It's in the annotations.
Oh, okay. So they don't have the next God King.
No, they do. They have another kid. It's just like, that's kind of like their backup. Well, we're going to try and get like an actual blood descendant. If that doesn't work, we have like the next God King in reserve, basically.
Okay.
It's kind of like a infant returning in the kingdom is kind of like their signal that a change needs to happen. Is like, well, can we get one that's actually blood related? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And in the no case, they just yoink the baby.
Okay. Definitely without the annotations, that is not clear in the book. And this is just a personal pet peeve of mine of when you need outside information for the in-story to make sense. So, like, if that's the case, I feel like Brandon should have made that more explicit in the actual book. Because it just kind of looks more like a plot hole to me, like just reading the book without the annotation.
Yeah, I don't think he necessarily wanted that to be clear. Because, like, he did very underscore, like, returned can't have children, which is, like, explicitly confirmed in the annotations. But in the actual text, one of the priests lie and say, like, nope, that's not possible. He's just lying through his teeth, which I think that's part of the thing that's being held out for Nightblood book.
Yeah, because I mean, that's one of the big overarching mysteries of the book is, well, if the Hallandren originally are descended from the royal locks come from being the descendant of a returned, and the returned can't have children, well, then where did they actually come from? Well, it makes more sense if the answer is, oh, the returned can have children. They're just lying through their teeth.
Yeah, because, like, Siri then, like, asks, it's Trailodes, like, well, then, like, how do you explain, like, the royal locks? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And, like, the mental gymnastics there is, like, the priests don't know if the method they're using to get the God King to impregnate people is the same as was used for the first returned. Which is not necessarily a satisfying answer, but this is still early, Brandon.
Do you have other pet peeves, or is that the big one? Or
I actually do have a pet peeve. Ciri has all of like the women who serve her. None of them ever get a line. Ever.
No, I think that
there's one or two, but like
one or two lines.
They might have. They're complete non-characters. None of them get named. She doesn't have any meaningful interactions with them. She's just kind of by herself, even though she's never alone. And it's like, I don't like that. Like, really? She can't have had like one confidant among her maids. Like, really?
Particularly after the relationship she had with Mab. Like, it would make sense if she did start forming another relationship like that with another maid that was close to her.
If you're in a situation like that where you've just been suddenly separated from everyone you know, you're probably going to latch on to someone and try to form more connections, especially when she's like stuck in the palace for a week, unable to really go anywhere or do anything. I think it does mention that she tries to start up conversations with them and they just ignore her. But I guess I would have expected her to keep trying and for something to come of it.
Yeah, it's like there's an explanation given. I still fault Brandon and having that explanation at all. So it's like, really? He could have found a way to make it work. He's complete god over this world.
Yeah, I kind of feel like he tried to do that with Bluefingers, but there was still some distance between them as characters. Like, they didn't have a really close relationship, particularly because Bluefingers was just manipulating Ciri. But I feel like maybe he was going for that with Bluefingers and like maybe Lightsong to a bit, but I totally see what you mean. Like, she would have spent so much time with her maids that if she had ones that were regular to her, particularly after she specifically asked for the Pancal girls to be her regular maids, then
yeah, I could see with the ones that are not Pancal being a little bit more, oh, she is the vessel, she is divine, we must, bow down, and not, being resistant. But once she switches to the Pancal girls, I could definitely see one of them. But at that point, we're so entrenched in the book that adding a new character doesn't quite make sense. But I think that there's a Pancal girl or two that are her servants even before then. So
the washerwomen were Pancal. And so basically it just flips out. So it's like the Hollingen girls become the washer girls and the washer girls become her day-to-day maids.
Yeah. Also, I want this, sorry, just random thought that I had. I want this to be adapted because I want to gush over Ciri's clothes. Like, if this ever gets adapted, they better choose a good costume designer because Ciri's dresses have the potential to be amazing. Yeah.
Get like Met Gala designs.
Just
tons and tons of them.
Yeah. No, this is the book that I want to be adapted the most. Like this one, and actually White Sand prose. I haven't read the graphic novel full way through, but White Sand, I've always thought would be wonderful to adapt. Like more than Mistborn or any of the others, White Sand would be so good to adapt to screen. Is that and Warbreaker?
I would definitely say it's probably an uncommon take.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I know.
It's an interesting one, but yeah.
It has the potential to be a true spectacle, and people like spectacles.
Yeah. Going off what you were saying about the Pancal girls, that leads really nicely into my other major problem with this book. And that is that the reveal that Bluefingers is the bad guy and that the Pancal were behind it the whole time just didn't land for me this time. I think the first time I was just shocked. I was like, wow, I can't believe that happened. Whereas this time, knowing it was going to happen, it didn't work for me. For two reasons. Firstly, Bluefingers doesn't really do anything in that scene to tip Ciri off. She just has a feeling that something is wrong and then suddenly gets all of the pieces in line at the exact right time to come up with the conclusion that she needs to call out the bad guy at just the moment that she needs to do so. So it all seems just a little bit coincidental that it all happened that way. But then she makes the comment that all of the people in the guard's uniform look just a little bit different. They're a little bit shorter and their skin tone is slightly different, so they're pan-Carl. You want to know when the first time these things come up in this book? That line, it is never brought up before. Like, I went back and looked.
I think Light Song mentions it. But Light Song mentions that, but he also mentions that the skin tone difference, it's while he's kidnapped, or he's captured as well, and he notices that their skin tone is a little bit different. But it also is presented almost as if you have to have a certain heightening in order to catch it.
Yes, it is. It's like when he's first captured, it's like there's something off about these priests, but he doesn't twig on it until Ciri has her revelation, and then he realizes oh wait, these are pan-Carl. But I do agree with Jessie that it's not, the pan-Carl are not described that way before that in the book that I've noticed.
I went back yesterday and looked through the big scenes that we know that the pan-Carl women are in with Ciri. I looked up every mention of the word short in Warbreaker, and let's say there's quite a lot of mentions of the word short. And there are 4 people described as short, and none of them are pan-Carl. And then the only time it's brought up in relation to the pan-Carl people is that line from Ciri. And it's just, I feel like this is just something that Brandon accidentally missed because he is very good at seeding things in. And this is just something that slipped through the cracks. But I think that would have helped a lot with this scene.
I almost wonder if it's he accidentally downplayed it too much because he didn't want to draw too much attention to the pan-Carl. Because he is it is constantly mentioned, but it is in these blink and you miss it ways. And I don't know if describing them more would have hung too much of a lantern on them.
I think it would have, if Ciri is gonna kind of base her conclusions on this one fact, then I do think that needs to have come up before. And he talks a lot about how they're constantly wearing brown, and I feel like he could have easily just switched out something at the very beginning to be like, oh, they look very slightly different and they wear brown. But that was my other major issue with this book, was just that scene did not land at all, and I just got very irritated by the whole thing.
Which is interesting, because when I just read that scene, I'm like, oh, I like that Ciri figured this out. It's she does something.
I will give her props that she went through all of the thought process and then came to the conclusion. Unlike some other books I've read where the main character suddenly has to know the answer and then figures it out and then goes through all of the evidence to get to the conclusion afterwards, which irritates me so much more. So at least Ciri is oh, all of these things just aren't quite adding up, and added them up in her mind, then drew the conclusion from it.
Any other final thoughts from people? How many more things do you have, Jessie?
I have one more. It's small. It's not a complaint, I promise.
Okay.
Last final small thing for me. I completely forgot that any amount of extra breath gives you a longer lifespan. Just straight up forgot that. I thought the returned had it either because they were returned or because you had to reach 5th heightening to then get agelessness and a longer lifespan. I just forgot that even before the 5th heightening, having some breath will make your lifespan longer. And that just kind of threw me for a bit when I first got to that.
Yeah, it is easy to forget that there are incremental effects and then plateaus.
Yeah.
For the various benefits of breath.
Side note, but I want to know how many people are in Hallandren, because part of me questions the math of how many breaths we see being thrown around, because Bavena is supposed to have multiple hundreds of breaths, and the God King is supposed to be given 3 or 4 each week, and each of the gods is supposed to be given at least one a week. And I'm surprised the city does not have more drabs in it with how many breaths are supposed to be consumed within this book.
I mean, I'm assuming there's several 100,000 people. I don't know magnitudes of population very well.
I was actually thinking much more than that, like up in the millions.
Millions, yeah.
I mean, even still, I mean, I guess if you get to the millions, it might make sense. But I mean, there's 20 gods? Lightsong mentions how many gods there are.
Roughly.
So that's, let's say, 23 breaths a week per person times 52. Just for the court of the gods to be consumed. That's quite a few people. And Lightsong's been alive for 5 years, so take that number and multiply it by 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then
they don't all have to be in Titulaire, I don't think. They could, the country of Hallandren could send people to the city, I imagine, and be like, here's a religious experience. Go and feed the gods. And they make a trek.
It might be helpful to think in terms of birth rates. It's like, there's definitely more than 23 people born each week in Hallandren.
That's fair.
There's probably several hundred, several thousand people born every week. Populations are often larger than we have the ability to comprehend.
That's fair. That was one thing that caught my eye this time around, was just kind of thinking about the logistics of there should be more drabs wandering around than what we see.
Mm-hmm. Vash also mentions plantations and going to talk to plantation workers with Vivenna. So there might be people who are literally incentivized by the Court of Gods to come in from the plantations because they are probably on the poorer side. It's we will give you a lot of money if you come and do this thing. So there might be more drabs outside of the city specifically. But I could also see that being a big, what's the word? I've forgotten the word.
Breath trade.
Yeah, basically a big breath trade between Hallandren and other countries as well. And that being just a source of things to trade between places.
Yeah, and it's more than just the gods. We see awakeners, and every anybody who has more than 50 breaths is automatically given entry to the court of the gods. And then I mentioned seeing an awakener just lift himself up. So
yeah, it's we also have to remember it's been several hundred years since awakening was discovered. That is time for breaths just to accumulate over time, as it's a thing we talked about on the forums and stuff before. It's if an elder of a family knows they're going to die soon, well, might as well pass on my breath so people can use it after my death, and that just builds up over time.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Also, with the Court of Gods and seeing the awakeners there's probably a greater proportion of them in that part of the city, and going elsewhere, you probably wouldn't see awakeners with that many breaths at all. They're probably more converging on this one place because it does have significance, and because you need those breaths to be able to get in there. So people who maybe only have 3 or 4 breaths, they just wouldn't turn up there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Someone should ask Brandon about that. Here's a question for you, listeners, if you're looking for one to ask Brandon. Ask him about the size of Hallandren.
Well, that will do it for our reactions to Warbreaker. Put yours in the comments below. And thank you for watching. You can find us at 17thshard.com for all of the news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud. You can leave us a review on iTunes. You can subscribe on YouTube. And you can also support us on Patreon. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.